would say love is probably the most selfish emotion, period. They're not thinking to themselves, okay, it's illegal. We're not advocating for illegal things here, but we don't really think about community as being full of love. Being a parent and dealing with kids, like your kids are people too.
So this is why you should care about love.
Okay, this is why you should care about love. Okay.
Start. How do we start? You want to start? Should I start?
I guess we start now.
Okay, I guess we start now.
Okay.
Well, hey, my name is Zeno.
My name is Ricardo.
And this will be the first, or like the pilot episode of the Great Conversation podcast, to be named. Yeah.
It's work in progress.
So today we'll be talking about how the American dream and modern urbanism might be pitted against each other, and how we might resolve that. So I want to open this podcast by first of all acknowledging that we are by no means any expert in that subject matter. And yeah, so we just think aloud and see what happens.
Yes.
So, well, Ricardo, do you want to start by like defining what you think is the American dream?
Okay, I think that's a good starting point. So, when I think of the American dream, what comes to mind is, the classical 1950s housewife, a house, a wife, and a housewife, and 2 to 4 kids and a dog, maybe a German Shepherd, maybe a Golden Retriever, white picket fence, clean lawn, and that's every neighborhood, that's every house in the block. That's at least what comes to mind when I think of the American dream.
Yeah, no, I do definitely get that. I also feel like the American dream is like very focused on like ownership and independence and actually being in control. But what I also see, or at least have felt when like reading, I'm an international student, so I read a lot of like American documents when I take my history classes. And I guess the general sentiment I always get from these speakers is that they want the American dream to be of equal opportunity to everybody, to have this family and independence, and also to something that nowadays seems a bit more abstract, to actually make a better living than your parents, maybe straight out of college.
Yeah.
That's very complicated today. And but I definitely feel that ownership is a very big thing that has been very important to the American dream, but has gotten more complicated now. You don't remember when you like owned movies, and like nowadays you have to like rent everything. Now I feel like nowadays you don't really have ownership; you only have access.
I think that's a really good way of putting it, especially in terms of like the shift from owning things to subscribing to things, because I definitely feel like that's somewhat part of the financial income inequality, right? Like the idea that we're going to allow people to access things, and so they feel like they're owning things, but they're not actually. So they're not really noticing the fact that like, hey, I can't get a house because I can get an apartment. They're not really noticing that like, okay, even socially, right? Like we have all this online space, all these online conversations, so it's like people aren't really taking account of the fact that like, okay, we're not really engaging with each other the way we used to. And who's to say whether that's good or bad, but I definitely think, I really like the fact that you separated like, or you delineated between like ownership and access, because I do feel like we're getting less of one in order to get more of the other.
Yeah, I mean, as you've mentioned, it does also feel like a part that's, really cool. Like, I use YouTube Music, and I don't own, like, any of the songs anymore, but I have just so many more songs in my library that I can, like, access for the foreseeable future, that it seems that definitely it can also, help you. But yeah, I mean, especially in the housing issue, it's a lot more complicated than just, virtual music or media.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, on the one hand, having that kind of independence helps you a lot because you feel you're in control, you feel like less anxious, etc. But I also feel like through that focus on independence in the last couple of decades, we've kind of built societies that are less focused on the us and only focused on the individual. And consequently, I mean, we see that with the loss of third spaces in cities. We see that, you have to drive everywhere. The general feeling that I have, especially in Atlanta, is that while in some like more urbanist place, I would park, in a parking garage, then like walk, like, I don't know, a quarter mile to my destination, across like a, more like walkable area. And along the way, I see a bunch of shops. I might look into one, I might run through public place, public park, talk to some people or not. I'm not super social, but yeah. So and like now, but here in Atlanta, it often feels like, okay, so I drive so I want to get something from a store, or like I want to go to a restaurant.
Yeah.
I drive up to the store. There is like free parking outside of the store. I park there. I go into the store or restaurant. I do my business. I go out, and I drive back. And so like, this is super convenient for me, and I feel a lot more comfortable when I know that there's like in front of store parking. But then again, I feel a lot less connected to the entire community. So we have like all these like box-shaped lots that are like almost little islands that you can visit, but it doesn't feel like it's nice and comprehensive. So I'm like, oh well, the store is nice, but I wouldn't say, oh well, this part of Atlanta is really nice. I mean, there are some nice parts of Atlanta. I especially like East Atlanta, I have to say, because there's just this more of this kind of feeling that everything kind of belongs together, and this is where I'd like to go for a walk.
Yeah. I definitely feel that. I do think Atlanta is a little better because we have MARTA, so there is public transit, and from there, like, it's relatively easy to get on the train, park your car at this train station, get on the train, and then walk to wherever you're going from the MARTA station within like 5 to 10 minutes. But at the same time, definitely, if you're like just driving in, like, you gotta find parking, and that's like almost impossible to find free parking, at least, if you don't want to like drop $20 an hour. And then, like you say, you have to go to your destination and do your thing there, and then you go. But I also think that's just reflective of like life in general, really, in a way. The idea that everything is kind of isolated from each other. Like you go to work, and your purpose to go into work is to make money, and then you take that money, you go home, and you spend it on whatever. You don't really see your work as like being integral to the community. So you don't really care about your job or your coworkers or your employees, because you're like, I just have to deal with these people so I can get my money. Whereas like back in the day, when maybe like everyone's living in a village with their tribe community, the jobs have an effect on the community, right? So if I'm a farmer, I don't farm, that means nobody eats. Or if I'm a healer and I don't heal, everyone gets sick. If I'm a priest and I'm responsible for like the moral condition of the community. So it's like roles, you used to be able to see the impact of your job immediately and know that, hey, like if I don't do my job well, then all these people are affected. But now it's like, well, I know that the company would just replace me if I don't do my job. So I'm just going to get mine and, go home. So I definitely feel like that sense of alienation, isolation doesn't just exist like materially. I also think it exists like socially, culturally.
I mean, it does feel like sometimes we just work for, a 2% better earnings report, whatever that means to people. So it might just be that back then this idea of a picket fence island lifestyle might have also just worked better because people still had these first spaces and the meaning through their work, right? They had the communities and churches and everything. And nowadays, like even the churches, I sometimes feel like you go there and it's kind of like a made experience. You go there, you have these like fixed groups that you have some kind of connection to, but it's just everything feels kind of strange in this world, which I'm not sure if there's like a clear way to fix that, because I think part of it is just because we have access to so much more, right? I know that, if I never had the chance to, leave my hometown in Austria, I would be a lot more connected to the hometown because simply I don't have any other options. So like, I don't, generally want to say that globalization is a bad thing, like that we have, that we are somewhat more detached, also from like harder jobs that, our jobs have become more convenient, more easy. But yeah, so I guess, how do you think you find like real experience and self-expression in those days?
I don't know. I feel like I agree with you. I think globalization is probably a net positive, just because like being able to like see and experience, even if secondhand or vicariously, what other people are going through, it widens your experience. And it shows you that like your way of thinking about things or doing things isn't the only way. And it gives you something to compare it to. And I think that's especially important in the context of like social movements, because like now you can actually see what other people are doing and what they're experiencing and da-da-da-da. Because I believe like a lot of the biases that we talk about in society so often, racism, sexism, whatnot, xenophobia, they're just largely in part due to ignorance. And because of the internet, like you can't be ignorant anymore. It's a lot harder because you can see you can see how other people live and see how similar it is to yours. You can see their culture, their arts, all their grand human endeavors, and see like, oh, those people are just like me. So it's a lot harder to be ignorant, and I think that's a good thing. It's also, we are able to see other technologies and see what other countries are doing and see, okay, can we bring that over here? Like with Japan and the bullet trains, the concept of like high-speed rail is definitely something I would like to see in America. And I do think it's possible because like now we have people able to say like, okay, like how are they doing that? How are they making the train? What's the science behind that? So I think that cultural exchange is good. And I also think, to your point about self-expression experience, I think being open to experience is like how you express yourself. Because like when you see like the graffiti, because sometimes on the highways you'll see the graffiti, like that's self-expression. People are engaging with their environment. They see this, infrastructure, and they're like, okay, I'm just gonna put my graffiti over. I'm just gonna express myself like that. Because they're not thinking to themselves, okay, it's illegal. We're not advocating for illegal things here, but we are saying that like you should be open to life. Like you should be open to leaving your impact on the world. You should be open to like experiencing things in a way that feels authentic to you as opposed to what society has set up.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, on that the internet makes you less ignorant,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super sure,
Mm-hmm.
because I've definitely seen like a lot of echo channels online where people are really like just pitted against every person that does not like 100% align with their exact way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some and like at least in my experience,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people who on the internet itself act like as a lot less accepting of people, but then in real life when they actually run into people
Mm-hmm.
and have these like shared experiences, like going to the climbing hall, for example, to the climbing gym, that it is a lot easier to be just nice people then, because like the internet does really accelerate and I guess show differences so much more, because like what do I care if somebody does like the exact same thing I do? That's like not new information. So I guess just our drive to find something can confirm our biases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, another question I had is that I feel like I am like very like as a college student, I have a very like I wouldn't say I have a fixed way of how I would want life to be, but I definitely would feel like interacting with the world in the way that I want to do, like mostly without a car, is like very important to me. And that that independence, etc., is not quite as important to me. And also I don't have so many responsibilities yet. I don't have kids I worry about. I don't have like a wife or a spouse that I worry about. So my life is a lot easier, and I feel like we do also need to recognize that there's like a lot of people out there that live like completely different lives, and maybe want to have just the isolated communities and the little islands of interaction, and want to be a stay-at-home partner, which I think is also totally valid. So I guess, how do we kind of build a city or a society that, or not just a city, but a suburb and some rural areas? What should be a principle that we might have that they're nice and they're for everybody, so they accommodate the person who prefers to live on I made it mansion on 10 acres of land, but also the kind of person who wants to live like a car-free lifestyle.
I definitely think you would have to have like walkable cities within like a certain space that has like really strong transit. So like within the city, you can just walk everywhere, so you don't have to worry about cars. And then outside the city, like between cities or whatnot, or even between states, you would just like rely on like high-speed public transit. So like a bullet train, not a car, or like a bullet train, or like maybe a bus system. Just like large groups of people moving all at once. Because one of the things that causes traffic and whatnot is just the fact that there's so much congestion of how many cars on.
Yeah.
So if we just had a bunch of buses, then there would be less traffic and everyone gets this. And if people are going to the same places, then there would be a lot less traffic.
Yeah. Like I love driving. I really like my car, and I love taking it around for a spin. But I also feel like there are a lot of people on the road, especially the I-85, 75, who really do not want to love driving, or at least according to how they drive. That's what I assume. So like what I really find super important about like public public transport is that all the people that do not want to drive do not have to drive, so that the people who want to drive can have, no, it's not primarily about them, right? But I feel like even for the people who prefer driving, it would be a lot nicer, if we didn't all have to share the same road, right?
Yeah.
And
I agree with that.
But I guess one stereotype or like stereotype adjacent that I feel like kind of breaks the idea of using public transport more, like at least in Atlanta, is that I feel like we do not have quite like the high trust in society to do that. So actually, I think there's where with the American, coming back to the American dream, where we have this kind of dichotomy. Like the American dream, like as mentioned, has this very big equal opportunity aspect, right?
Yeah.
But you also want to, with that equal opportunity, you want to use it to climb the social ladder, have upward mobility, and be then in control and independent.
Yeah.
But I feel like because we've created these spaces that are mainly by people who want to be totally independent and like almost like outside of society, I just feel like that we do not have a general nice public space anymore, because I feel like that everybody who could retreated from the public space, and consequently the only people that like are still left in the big public sphere, at least for large parts of the public areas that I see, are the people who have not entered the category of I made it, I have achieved the American dream, and I'm like full in on that independent ownership lifestyle. So I guess how can we make these like general public spaces nicer again, and how can we make them accommodating that all the people that have already achieved the American dream actually want to spend time there and want to spend money on those kind of public infrastructure projects? Because I feel like, especially on the conservative wing, there are a lot of people who just say, well, everything that's public, that's like like for example, I've seen comments on Reddit saying that Lenox Mall, like Lenox Square, was really nice till they built public transport to it. And that just, to me as a European, is a bit absurd, because in Europe we have like, what I think is so beautiful about Europe is, not our houses, but like definitely our nature and a lot of our public spaces, because we've kind of elevated the level of what the public is to, also accommodate all these people that do make, 6-7 figures a year. That, and I feel like, so I guess I've heard the statement once is that a rich society is not where the poor people drive cars, but where the rich people take public transport. And I guess, how do you think, Ricardo, that we could entice those kind of people to give the public space, the public sphere, another shot? Because I mean, one thing that I definitely see is that like Atlantic Station, there's a lot of these like proto nice urbanist areas, right? That are like, well, you can park here for on some crazy high parking fee price, but then you get to experience like the walkability aspect in like controlled zone. But then again, I feel like that in these controlled areas, you do not have like the bottom layer of society that it still very much exists. So I guess how do you build a space that accommodates both layers, so that both would say, okay, I'm happy to be here in this public space, I'm happy to mingle, I'm happy to exchange ideas, and so that everybody can achieve this American dream together.
I mean, that's a really good question. I'm not quite sure how do we get rich people to like willingly cooperate, because to me, maybe perhaps the most straightforward answer would be like, oh, we should just increase taxes, and then we should do like a New Deal style government spending on like, okay, let's build some libraries, let's build some museums, let's build some like YMCAs, like some like activity centers. But then of course, then there's a question of like, is it really justifiable to say, okay, we're going to raise taxes to do these things? And it seems kind of hard to say. That we should arbitrarily raise taxes to do that. At the same time, though, I think from the framework of like investing in the public, investing in the next generation, I do think like that makes a lot of sense, right? Like people going to libraries. Like I'm not sure if you've been to the Central Library in near Peachtree.
No, unfortunately not.
But it's like, yeah, it's actually really cool. Like Georgia Tech students can get a Fulton County Library card, so guys, go do that. But it's a really beautiful library, and I think part of that is because of the fact that like it's in the city, and the city hasn't decided to invest in it. So I do think that maybe maybe not by means of like taxes, but just in terms of like seeing where we can allocate government budget towards that sort of thing, as opposed to like something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you feel like command and control has to be like a necessary point of view? You know, that like a necessary measure that, okay, we now have the taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now we actually need to make some more drastic changes to
Mm-hmm.
like take all of these little islands of
Mm-hmm.
I guess public space and transform them into like a coherent city.
I mean, I don't think we should like try to decimate the local economy, because I think that'd be really bad. Like just taking away all the mom and pops and putting a bunch of like McDonald's and Starbucks in their place. I don't think that's a good idea. What I do think is, because I feel like a lot of these structures are already exist, right? So like I would say most cities have like a public library connected to like a county-wide library system. I think even in Atlanta there's quite a few parks. So I think really maybe the main thing is just maybe making people more aware of these things that are already existing. And by means of that, then we can say, okay, now that people are going more often, maybe we can say, hey, if you'd like to donate, support your local library, and then through that we raise the means by having people voluntarily say, I appreciate this resource, I'm going to donate to it. Because that's effectively how corporations work, right? Like they produce a product that people like, people buy the product, and part of the revenue from those sales goes to investment. So we're going to invest in a better machines, better factory, maybe a little bit towards marketing, advertising, whatnot, hiring new workers. So I think it'd be the same thing for public utilities.
But do you think like that like more individualistic Western governments would ever allow that? You know, since they're like, I feel like there's always this push of a more progressive government says that this is something we want to implement, and then it just takes time because these projects takes time, and then there's something that the population really objects to, and they re-elect conservative government. The conservative government scraps those plans. So like I thought about that, right? Because I so often have people coming up to me and saying, hey, actually, I feel like the East is so much more developed because they have these like super futuristic high-tech cities with the real nice metros and maglev trains, right? So I guess, do you think that so my main idea is that to get everybody on board, there needs to be like some kind of uniting vision for like a universally well-developed city. I mean, I think it's beauty. That we need to have beauty as this vision, that people take pride to not just live in their own home on their own acre, but in a city that they want to strive forward to, like strive to improve. And
That's interesting. I think it's interesting that you say beauty, like taking an aesthetic approach. I don't know. I think I would say something more like love and community, like specifically communal love. I definitely think like when we talk about love, we often come from the perspective of romantic love, and that's like what we see in the media. That's what we focus on, right? Because like one of the milestones in life, at least culturally, is like, oh, you find some poor, unfortunate soul, and you strap them to you for the rest of their lives through marriage, right? So I definitely think were you about to say something?
No, I mean I do. Yeah, but like I do find it very interesting that you bring up the point that media only focuses on like romantic love. Like how the Greek separates loves into into all these different categories. But like that this communal love is like, although I definitely feel like communal love is also like more like older stories that we do see that reflected. Yeah, nowadays, like what kind of stories do you have where like the entire community comes together? I mean, I can think of some. But compared to romantic love, I guess romantic love just sells more, or sells better, which I think is because like it's more intimate, right? It's more selfish. It's like it is like, okay, I only need to find one person to cooperate, compared to okay, I might freeload because everybody has to cooperate. Like in a very serious relationship with like very serious love, you cannot freeload, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
100% agree.
In such a communal product easily, right? So, yeah, that's why I personally think we need something almost more selfish than love. But I was wondering if you just had any more ideas on like how you could inspire that love.
That's interesting that you say something more selfish than love. I would say love is probably the most selfish emotion, like, period. Like, because to me, I mean, the concept of love is this acceptance of something beyond the involuntary preference stage, right? Like liking something or disliking something, it's more or less a matter of preference, which is more or less involuntary, right? Like if my favorite color is purple, I can't just change it to green, right? But saying that maybe you love something, it requires like a deeper understanding of it in order to really appreciate it for all its qualities. So I feel like selling love to people is like the best way to go. And I think the reason, like to your point about like romantic love being easier to sell, I think that in part is because we don't really think about community as being a form of love. We kind of just see it as like a thing in the background. But it's like because we don't have that communal conception of love, our like individual relationships conceptions of love are weaker. Because when you are in a relationship, let's say within the context of marriage, you are in community with that person. You are in a union. You have to consider that person's wants and whims and whatnot as equal to your own, right? And like when you become like one, and like that's your one community, your one union. But if you don't have that sort of like community level mindset, it becomes harder to conceptualize that within the context of marriage, or even being a parent and dealing with kids. Like your kids are people too. They have rights, they have all that. So they're not just, your little slaves to do dishes. Right, exactly. Apparently. So I do think that taking a communal love approach is the way to go. And I think we need to change the way people think about love. And I think that not just for like urbanism, but also like just in general. I think people would be happier in general if we were able to tap into a more community level sense of love as opposed to an individual one.
Yeah, I do find that very interesting because when I think of love, I primarily think of like self-sacrifice for something that you value more than yourself. But it is like I totally agree that love, especially the first part of love, is like super selfish, right? Like I want this right now, and honestly, I think that you're correct in that reason that because like I feel like it has a selfish and not so selfish part. The selfish part being the first one, and the more sacrificial, not selfish part being the what you then do for the love. And honestly, I might like definitely like generally agree with your definition about like because the selfish part, it kind of hooks you in, right? But like just through like selfish motivations, it'd be hard to to have like the private provision of public goods if we speak on a like purely economical term.
Right.
But if we entice with the selfish term, right, to say, okay, well, here's why you should care about that, why you should be in love with your own, not romantically, but why you should share love with your city, and then through the selfish hook, you then become not selfish and actually sacrificial. I think that's actually a really cool idea.
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely think even when we talk about like the human condition and people being like fundamentally selfish, I would say people are definitely self-interested, but I don't necessarily think that excludes being self-sacrificing. Because I think what prompts people to self-sacrifice is their interest in the well-being of other people. And I think that as human beings, we naturally turn to that. I think we are naturally interested in other people and their well-being because their pain reflects back onto us, and likewise their joy reflects back onto us. So I think that achieving that community level love isn't as hard as we believe it to be. It's just it's hard because it's like it's not something that we're really used to seeing.
Yeah, I mean, in closing, do you think we have any big impairments nowadays in society to that love? Anything that like keeps us away? Or any I guess other incentives or like ideas how you want to spread that you want to tell our listeners that this is why you should care about love.
Okay, this is why you should care about love. Okay. I mean, definitely the media. I definitely think the media impedes love for sure. It's particularly like when you think about like something like Instagram, you you are able to like see into everyone's life, right? But you only see like instances, right? So you see a post and you see maybe they're like partying on a boat or something, right? So you just see that. You see that particular frame of time, but you don't see all the events that led to it, right? So you don't see them, working at McDonald's for the past 10 years, while in college to get a good job.
Right, building up.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like
career,
you only
right.
see the end result.
Yeah.
And I feel like that applies to like so many different things, right? Like when someone posts their marriage on Instagram, all you see is the wedding day.
Right.
You don't see the relationship, you don't see how they met, you don't see all the arguments, the fight, you don't see the couples therapy. Like you don't see all the things that build into having a healthy relationship that accumulates in like, I do. You just see the image. And I think that's the problem with everything, right? Or even like the gym, right? Like you see people like as the finished product. So you see the gains, but you don't see the months of going to the gym, just cranking out hours on the treadmill and pumping iron. You just see the finished result, but you don't see the months of hard work without those results. You don't see the process. You just see the product. And I think that leads people to have a false sense of reality, because they see like, oh wow, like this person's here and I'm there. I'm like, wow, I must be such a loser. But you don't see the process. So, and because you don't see the process, you can't even begin to conceive about change, right? And even stuff like befores and afters, you'll see the person, we're like, wow, like this person was just like me. And now they're like, they've made a complete 360. But people don't talk about the process, right? Because I think part of that is maybe shame, right? Maybe people feel ashamed for like their past. And I also think another part of that is just that like we as like people seeing these things, we sort of like maybe brush it off because we don't want to take responsibility for ourselves, right? So we don't want to say like, oh wow, like this person changed and they're like me, like that means I can change too, right? Because like the focus on the symbol as opposed to understanding the meaning behind it, I find that to be very destructive, because it makes people not understand why they're doing things, right? Like when people focus on like going back to marriage, when people focus on getting a ring, right, like as opposed to the commitment.
Like the trad lifestyle,
yeah, exactly.
Right? That's what I see so many people on Twitter, they're like, oh my God, why doesn't everybody want to live on a farm? That is like, a very good sign of seeing that people have never actually done any farm work.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so, but it's not a bad thing, right? Like I've spent a lot of time on farms in Austria, and it is like a very honorable lifestyle. It's just, not as easy and just coasting as people think, right? It's a lot of like sacrifice. So, yeah. So I guess in closing, take up responsibility. Like think about the people next to you. Yeah. Love thy community. Love thy neighbor.
Get off those damn phones.
Yeah. Well, go out into the world. Do something. Do something of value. Yeah. And have some more great conversation.
Absolutely.
Cheers.